Welcome everybody to our 2023 candidate forum. We're going to give just a quick minute so folks online can have instructions on how to access interpretation, and then we'll get started. Over to me? Not yet. Okay. Yeah. Are you okay? Great. So my name is Anna Cole, and I'm the Chief of Student and Family Services for the Roaring Fork Schools. I'm also the current acting superintendent. Delighted to have some turnout in person. I know there's folks online tonight. We're really grateful to have Crystal Logan here. She's the Vice President for Aspen Community Programs and Engagement with the Aspen Institute as our moderator. Also super grateful for our Roaring Fork School District Communications and Logistics team, who I know is working really hard to make sure that people have access and can hear from our candidates tonight. Also really excited to have the Roaring Fork Community Education Association here as co-sponsors for this event and for the work they do in terms of teacher leadership. And most importantly, really grateful for the 5 candidates who we're going to hear from tonight. You know, a board member for the Roaring Fork School District is a volunteer job, and it's a big job. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of really difficult work, focusing on governance, accountability, resource allocation, representation, and communication with our community. And, you know, the real intent is to make sure that as a public serving organization that we are aligned to mission and we're getting the right outcomes for kids and we're supporting our staff. And tonight you're going to hear what makes these 5 individuals distinct and what they're hoping to bring to this role. But I also want to name that what they share is a deep commitment to our students, to our staff, and to our community. And they also all share a willingness to serve in a way that's really profound and will have big impacts on their lives and their time. And we're so grateful for their willingness to jump and do this work with us. Rob Norval, who's the president of the Roaring Fork Community Education Association, is also going to say a few words of welcome, and then we'll jump in.
Thanks, Anna. So on behalf of the teachers of the Roaring Fork School District and the 200 or so members of RFCEA, I want to say welcome and thank you for being here tonight. One of the things that teachers do a lot of is promote community engagement and civic engagement. And so it's always good to see a number of adults willing to model that behavior for our students. I'm going to turn it over now to our facilitator tonight from the Aspen Institute, Crystal Logan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Let's see. Thanks for joining us this evening in person and online. We're here to get to know the 5 candidates running for the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education. I'm honored to be the moderator tonight. I'm a graduate from the district myself and a parent. I'm very proud of the district. It's the best in the Valley. I'm so honored to be here. Special thanks to the Roaring Fork Colorado Education Association and the Roaring Fork School District for hosting this forum. I want to start this evening by giving a public show of gratitude to all the teachers, support staff, janitors, bus drivers, and cafeteria staff. We are fortunate to have the entire team of professionals doing great and tireless work for our students. So let's give them a round of applause. Also, we are fortunate to have 5 community members stepping up to run for the school board. You're strengthening the social fabric of our community with your willingness to serve in this important role. There will always be challenges, but it's how we as a community solve these challenges together that will make a positive difference in the lives of all of the students that we serve. So on behalf of us all, we thank you for running for this important position in the community. We have about an hour and we have a lot to cover, so I'll be strict on timing. And I've already talked with you about the timer. There are 3 open board seats, 1 each in districts B, C, and D. We have 2 candidates competing for those seats. And then Jasmine is running unopposed for District D. Voters in the Roaring Fork School District will receive mail-in ballots, right? They'll be going out soon, probably mid-October, I think. Okay, 16th. So be sure to get your ballots back in by Election Day, November 7th. All voters cast a vote for all of the candidates, regardless of where you live. So you don't have to vote for whoever is in your district. You can vote for a total of 3, right? Great. Let's see. And finally, please silence your cell phones. And as we kick off the forum, I will say that our goal here tonight is to get to know the candidates and to hear their perspectives before we vote. And the format is not a debate. Rather, we'll be listening respectfully. So 2 candidates are running for the District B seat being vacated by Maureen Stepp. That's Philip Bogart and Lindsay DeFreitas. And 2 candidates are running for District C seat currently held by Natalie Torres. That's Betsy After and Alan Kokish. And then Jasmine is running unopposed. So the format for the event is that you'll have 2 minutes to respond to all of the questions. And first, I'll just give some brief introductions. Betsy After lives in Carbondale with her husband and 2 children. She served as the president of the Mount Sopris Montessori Preschool Board, and her family owns a local business. And she's raising 2 children in an Roaring Fork School District school. Philip Bogart and his family moved to the Valley in 2019, and they have 4 kids, all in the district, and he's a certified foster parent. Lindsay DeFreitas has lived in the Valley for nearly 20 years, and she's raising 3 children, all of whom are in the district. And for approximately 6 years, she taught middle school language arts in Carbondale. Alan Kokish moved to the Valley in 1992 with the simple dream of becoming a ski bum. He's married and has 2 kids and owns and operates a local business in the area. And then Jasmine lives in Glenwood Springs with her husband and 2 children. She's currently serves as the board's vice president and as a representative in the recently formed policy committee. So with that, we will jump right in. To our first question, opening remarks. Jasmine, you're first. Please tell us why you're running for the board, what qualifies you, and what strengths and qualities you would bring to this role.
Thank you. So my family's lived here a little over 16 years, graduated from Glenwood Springs High School, so I am a graduate. I have 3 younger siblings who also graduated, go Demons. And 2 nephews, one who graduated and one who dropped out. I think that I bring a level of expertise, being that I've already been in this role for 4 years. But also I think there's the reality that I represent a vast majority of this community of our district. I'm was a PTA mom before becoming a board member, and still care deeply about making sure that our schools and our staff, from teachers to custodians, that everyone feels that they're part of the conversation. And so I think I bring that inclusive nature to our conversations at the district level. I'm just really excited. I definitely took me a long time to get here, as I'm sure many of you know, but I'm excited to be in this journey again for another 4 years and to hopefully continue the charge that we started off in trying to make sure that our school district encompasses what really our values are. We have strategic priorities coming up that I think we really need to finalize for the future of our district. And I'm really excited to be a part of that conversation as well. Portrait of a Graduate. There's a lot of things that we've overcome, including the pandemic. But I think it's leveraged a lot in my opportunity to lead and be able to lead us moving forward. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited to have the opportunity to work with some of our fellows here.
Thank you. Next is Alan. Tell us why you're running for the board. What qualifies you? What strengths and qualities you bring to this role?
Thanks, Crystal. Thanks everyone for being here. It's an honor to be here. My qualifications for the position are really pretty simple and singular. I'm a concerned dad who feels like a lot of people in the Valley's voices are not being heard, or they're possibly even being ignored. So really more than talking about what I've done, I want to take a minute and just talk about who I am. Many of my values I feel were formed at a pretty early age. At 3 years old, our family adopted a young African-American girl, my sister Karen. I'm sorry, I made a few notes. And shortly thereafter, my parents decided to move the family from the East Coast to the West Coast. So we loaded up our camper, the Ford Falcon, my dad, big bushy beard, my mom, her flowing blouses, sort of hippies of the 60s, I think you could even say. We settled in a small town in Northern California where we lived a semi-communal life. Growing up, it was pretty common for other kids to use a homophobic slur to insult other boys. And so at about the age of 7, I remember using this slur, and my dad quickly pulled me aside and he explained to me, he asked me, do you know what that means? I'm not sure if I did, but he explained it to me. Excuse me. He said, do you know our friend Mark? Well, he's gay. And that's a horrible insult that you've just used. Would you think it's okay for someone to use an N-word to describe your sister? It's equally, offensive to use that word. I don't ever want to hear you say that again. It's not acceptable. So that's really always stuck with me my entire life. The ideas of acceptance, inclusion, diversity, these are values that I hold with me to this day. My parents live here in Carbondale. They fly a rainbow flag right underneath the American flag outside their house or their apartment. The reason I decided to run for school board is my strong objection to the sex ed curriculum, the K-8 sex ed curriculum that's been adopted by the district. I understand it's intended to be a beacon to the LGBT community, and I support that intent. The curriculum is clumsy at best, with no data to indicate efficacy helping with mental health issues or transgender suicide rates. If elected, I'll work really hard with the board to hopefully adopt a curriculum that can be more inclusive and diverse and represent our entire community.
Lindsay, you're next.
Thank you, Crystal. My name is Lindsay DeFreitas, and as mentioned, I have lived in and around the Valley for almost 2 decades. My husband and I have 3 kids currently in Sopris Elementary School, which is a fantastic place to be if you are 10, 6, and 7. And I am really excited for this opportunity. Having spent 6 years in the classroom in the Roaring Fork Valley, I have a unique perspective. I've been a classroom teacher. I have looked 7th and 8th graders in the face every day in the last week of April, which if you know that, you'll understand that I'm ready for difficult conversations. I'm also really excited to be able to bring some transparency back into the communication process between the board and the community. I think a little bit of trust has been lost there. And I think that there's some culpability on both sides. And my training as a public relations professional puts me in a unique position to be able to do that outreach. And as a teacher, you recognize first thing you're taught is you may be saying it, but if people aren't hearing it, it's not working. So we need to be able to address that as a community and a school board. I'm also really able to use the work that the school board does in making policy and hiring leadership with the eye of how it's going to impact our students. We need to make sure that we are offering them the best resources. And right now, the best resources for them are experienced educators who are given the professional respect that they need in their classroom and given the support staff to make sure that they can focus just on what they were hired to do. So that's a big priority for me as well. I'm also really excited to learn and grow our ability to close the achievement gap between our Latino and white students, which has continued to grow since the pandemic. There's unique opportunities and funding available now that I think can be offered as some potential creative solutions. And I'm going to take a lot of guidance on that because I think many people have found ways to do it better than I know personally. And mostly, I'm just really excited to serve this community. It's something that I didn't expect to be doing quite this soon, but I am very happy to be here now.
Great. Over to you, Philip.
Great. My name is Philip Bogart. As Crystal mentioned, my family and I have been here for about 4.5 years. We have 4 kids that are all in the Roaring Fork School District. We think it's wonderful. We moved here. My career allows me to kind of pick and choose where I go from time to time. We moved here with the intention of coming here and staying. We think it's a wonderful place. We had both been here to visit and just fell in love. So our hope is that our kids come back to visit us with our grandkids down the road. So that's kind of the investment that we want to have in our community. We have been foster parents for a number of years. That comes from a heart that wants to be faithful community members and a heart for kids. Not only do we have 4 kids, but we just, I don't know, my wife and I enjoy them maybe too much. We had 7 kids that stayed the weekend at our house this last weekend, and it was wonderful. I don't have enough energy for that, but we're working on that. I want to be on the school board because I want to be a committed father. This is the stage of life that we're in. I want to do the best that I can to provide my kids with great education. I think if I'm doing that for my kids, I'll have a great impact on our community and our school district. It's great sitting next to Lindsay and hearing a lot of her priorities. I think it sounds awesome. I would say we up here, I hope all have the same heart, and I hope that you hear that. I'm anxious to learn more about what it is to be on the school board. I've done a lot over the last 2 months to try to prepare myself and understand topics. I think there are some very meaningful ways and technologies that we've developed that we can do a better job communicating with community members. I think that would be one priority of mine. I know we'll get into a lot of other priorities, but I mostly want to communicate in opening statements that I'm a committed father, want to be in this, and want to make sure that we do a great job with our community.
Thank you, Betsy.
Great. Thanks, Crystal, and thanks to the district and the RFCEA for hosting this forum tonight and for giving the voters the opportunity to hear from all of the candidates in this really consequential election on November 7th. I live in Carbondale, as Crystal mentioned, and my 2 children attend Crystal River Elementary School, and they'll be students at public Roaring Fork schools for the next decade. I'm running because I feel that I can support them and all students in the district by bringing my dedication to public education, as well as my expertise in policy, financial management, and stakeholder engagement to the school board. As a board member, my top priorities will be, first of all, responsible, transparent leadership and smart fiscal management. So we need to set an expectation of excellence and accountability for the executive staff and ensure that the annual budget aligns with our community's priorities. Second, to support educators, we have a desperate need to increase teacher retention and recruitment. The state is handcuffed by Tabor, and so we have to find creative approaches to pay teachers more and increase retention without necessarily relying on future tax increases. Third priority of mine is success for all students. So there's a known persistent achievement gap between Latino and white students in our schools. This means that 55 to 60% of our students could enter our schools today with the knowledge and awareness that they have statistically worse outcomes than their peers. Lastly, open communication and deep community engagement. After the past year, I do feel like we need to strengthen the board's relationship with the community again. My professional experience at a large nonprofit organization in the Valley has prepared me for the policy and fiscal responsibilities that come with being on the board. In my current role at Rocky Mountain Institute, listening to different stakeholders and coming to consensus on thorny issues is part of what I do for my daily job. I have other qualifications too, but thank you.
All right, thank you. The next question is about the role of board members, and Alan, you're first. Please describe in your own words the role of a board member and how you would approach the requirements and the rigors of the role.
Well, really what I know about the role is what I've managed to learn over the last month or 2. So the responsibilities of the board are really threefold, which is my understanding. So one is superintendent review. Second is the budget. And thirdly is a policy. Now, as far as I understand, it's not really the board's job or place to develop policy, but rather to adopt policy. So recommend areas that you think need to be addressed to the superintendent, and the superintendent addresses those and comes back with a policy, which then you're able to give input. Yes, this is a good idea. No, maybe not. And, I've had the chance to sit in on a few meetings with the sitting board. How to address the rigors, boy, it would be a lot of work. And I would just really lean into the people that have done it already, look for advice there. I'm new to this, so I would just come with, like my wife says, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you use them accordingly. And that's how I approach it.
Thank you, Alan. Lindsay, you're next.
Well, I agree with Alan. It is going to be a challenge to meet the rigors of this position. And I acknowledge that the people who have been on it before us, especially for the last 4 years through the pandemic, have lifted an enormous amount to be able to show up for our community. And I'm going to tone down the teacher voice there for a second. And I just want to acknowledge that's a tremendous gift to our community, that we've had leadership that's been consistent throughout such a difficult time. I think that it's obviously the hiring of the superintendent is the staff member that we impact the most as a board, and that the effects of those choices trickle down very strongly onto the heads of building leadership and staff at the district level, but it also affects student outcomes as well, because that's setting the direction for the district. I think that working with staff to create effective policies is a big part of it as well. And I think that making sure that teachers are also welcome to the table in the creation of those policies, which will most directly affect them in their ability to do their job, is another important role that the board is going to have going forward. And then going back a little bit to address perhaps where we've lost some ground in the community perception, it's sometimes difficult for our community to understand the role of the board versus the superintendent versus the district leadership and the building leadership. And so I think another role that we have is to communicate clearly the work that we're doing with our community. And if we aren't getting people showing up, so for example, when I was at the strategic plan meeting here a few weeks ago, we had maybe 4 members of the community. I think there's a lot more online. I know the outreach there has been very direct, and because so many people have 3 jobs in the Valley, I hope that virtual participation is really where we get our best return. But just making sure that outreach continues to happen in a way that it's being heard, because if people aren't coming to the table while those choices are being made, they're never going to feel like they have ownership in the outcome of those choices. So I think that that's mostly where we fall.
Great. Thank you. Philip, you're next.
Thanks. So yeah, there are 3 main priorities or responsibilities for the board. That is setting policy, hiring, and holding accountable the superintendent, as well as preparing the budget. All of those come from a heart and a desire, at least for me, if I was on the board, to make sure that our kids receive the best quality education they can. We won't be holding teachers accountable directly. We'll work through the superintendent to do that. But I think reviewing, seeing, and making public all of our scores and standardized testings is very, very important for all community members, especially parents and caregivers. So there are 3 particular things that as a board member, we must focus on. But if we lose sight of the idea that our kids' education is absolutely central to all of that, then I think we've missed the point. So my goal would be making sure that our kids receive quality education and have a great, safe place to do that in.
Great. Thank you. Betsy, you're next.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what has been said, especially what Lindsay said. One thing that hasn't been said yet is that I think the school board can play an important role in advocating on behalf of the district in Denver, where we know we don't have enough resources, right? Our mountain community is being it's just under the weight so much of economic instability right now. And so we have to find additional financial resources. And so the board can be a voice in state networks and statewide organizations and in Denver for advocating for additional funding for public schools like ours. Also holding, in addition to what other folks have said, holding the superintendent to an extremely high standard, same standard that we hold teachers and other staff to, is an important role of the board. Overseeing policy. And then one thing I do want to say that I believe is not the role of the board is to make specific curriculum decisions. Rather, I think the board's role is to listen to the experts who have been hired through the school district, through the superintendent hiring process, to ensure that the students have the best curriculum. But I do not think that it is the board's role to get into the weeds on specific curriculum decisions or textbook decisions.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I love this question. So yes, to so many things that have been shared. Hire, fire, evaluate the superintendent is obviously a priority. Our board currently has worked extensively on this and has recently updated our evaluation tools to ensure that there are goals for the superintendent as we evaluate them, and that is expressed to the public, which I think is something that we're very proud of. Obviously, policy making, we are policymakers. We are literally the local legislators for schools. So we need to make sure that we are creating policies that are effective, that are student-centered, that are equitable, and that are consistent with our values. So that is something that has been very crucial for our board. We have created a policy committee that I am proud to be a part of. And also obviously budget, right? We have to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible, that we understand the budget as board members, and then we are also making sure that it reflects our values. And that includes, how do you close the achievement gap? How do you make sure you have good programming? How do you make sure that the schools have what they need to be successful? So all of those are amazing things that I feel like we are doing, and that I hope that we continue to work towards in the coming 4 years. And I would just echo what Betsy stated, that it is our priority as well to be advocating at the state level. And I've been very proud to do some of that work, school meals for all, as well as the UPK have been two really important programs. Governor Polis was in one of our schools this morning. I was so honored to be there and to be, in seeing him witness programming that really comes from us as leaders being part of the conversation that is happening in Denver, so that we can be included in those decisions that happen at the state level.
Thank you. The next question is about strategic priorities. Lindsay, you're first. One of the strategic priorities for the 23-24 school year is to increase equity in student achievement. As a potential board member, how do you see your role in support of this priority?
Thank you, Crystal. I think that to begin with, I have to be clear about what my working definition of equity is, just to put the context on it. And I think that there's nuances to this that that I've learned more about as we go forward. But for now, to me, it means giving people what they need when they need it. And so I think that for me, that's a clear lens to say that as you evaluate a budget that is meeting the needs of all three different communities, which have very different priorities, and it's meeting the needs of students which come to us from all different backgrounds and all different ability levels, languages, learning styles, sexual orientation, everything like that, that we are offering them resources that are giving them what they need to achieve. Our schools have ground to make up. We are definitely not the only district to be facing this. We have the pandemic hit everybody hard, especially in our achievement gap. And then I also feel as though we need that ability to offer students rigorous classroom activities, to challenge them to thrive in a growing, changing world, and then also to hold them accountable and to hold schools accountable. So as we talk about roles supporting this, I think that the conversations that happen in this room and that have happened in this room for the last 4 years need to make sure that we are bringing those resources from wherever they've been to wherever they need to be. So whether that's financial choices that we are facing with different windfalls, with property taxes increasing, or whether we are looking at realigning priorities with our leadership and our superintendent, it does mean being able to change. So as a board that has to adapt and has had to adapt, I think that that's going to continue. We can't let our students and our teachers down by lowering our expectations for them. At no point would you ever get that answer from a classroom teacher. They do nothing but try to find the way to deliver the most rigorous teaching that they can. And we need to be able to support them and how that looks differently in different buildings and communities.
Thank you. Philip, you're next.
I think we have some wonderful educators in our valley. The ones that are teaching our kids, I'm very impressed with. So I would say I would want to lean on them and the other administrators in our district to find creative solutions to this. To me, the other piece of that is listening to parents and caregivers that are in our community and understanding the challenges that they face as they talk to their kiddos and what they see at home from their kids. I think providing a variety of resources and creative learning opportunities for kids to meet them where they are is important. I would also add to this that the definition of equity, and I appreciate your definition that you gave, the definition of equity can't mean that we take kids who are achieving at high levels and don't give them the opportunity to continue to excel, right? So we have to be able to provide excellent education and find the kids that are struggling and say, okay, this isn't working. How do we shift so that we can provide an after-school opportunity or a lunchtime opportunity or some other creative program that allows them to catch up and have the opportunity to thrive? So to me, we would lean on professionals that are in the district already, listen with open ears to our community members and stakeholders that would have other creative thoughts on how to solve this problem.
Thank you. Betsy, you're next.
Great, thanks. Great question. The budget that the board sets in the spring and early summer really determines the priorities. And so if this is a strategic priority that the district has identified, then the way to make good on that is to invest in it at the budget management level. So I think that's what I would advocate for doing if on the school board. If our priorities is to increase equity in student achievement, then we have to make that decision at the budget level and figure out what resources we need to invest in equity and student achievement, which, I mean, it goes without saying, unfortunately, it means you take resources away from other things. So that's how you make strategic priority decisions during the budget process. And I think that's what this school district has to do in order to try to close the achievement gap that we have seen year over year.
Thank you. Jasmine, and then Alan.
Yeah, so I think, it's really exciting time for our district to be working on strategic priorities. I think it's much needed, and there is a lot of opportunity for us to really engage with the community to define what that looks like. Equity has been one of the drivers in our district. We have included it in our evaluation. We've included it in our policy making. We've included it in the language we use when we're deciding on issues in our budget. And I think that we need to continue to do that. I think as a board member, if you are in support of equity for all, including students, teachers, staff, families, then you're going to want to prioritize it. And it's going to be a huge driver for you in how our conversations happen, whether it's in a board meeting, whether it's in a work session. We are the leaders of the district. And so if it is a priority for us, then we express that to our team, who then goes out and does the work and brings those that research, that work back to us on how we can achieve it. And so I look forward to continuing that conversation. As the community well knows, I've been a huge advocate for equity in our district, and I continue to want to pass a equity policy that will hopefully make it easier for all of us to continue to have this conversation on what it looks like to have equity in our schools, what it looks like when it comes to our students and to everyone involved in our district. And so I think as a board member, it's just really important to make sure that your team knows that this is important for you.
Thank you. Alan.
Right. So equity, I guess we're really referring to, I think, or largely the gap between the Latino learning students and the English speaking learning students. So I think in a way it's, I don't know, a little presumptuous of me to speak to it too much. I think I'd really lean on people like Jasmine, Alex Sanchez, people who are in that community who may, and other experts as well, who may be better able to solve what's happening there. And it's also, it's really complicated because, like, I've learned some of the data, it's hard because some students may be coming here 14, 15 years old, Spanish speaking. They may be able to learn algebra at a sophomore level, but then they're put into a class where they can't understand the language, or vice versa. They may know the material, but not the language. So gathering the data, it's a really complicated issue. And I've watched the board struggle with it, trying to address it. Like, what can we do? How can we do better? So I know they're working towards it. One thing, I guess, on a broader, larger scale, I always wonder, I've been to some of the meetings where all the data is presented, and it's pretty overwhelming. The one thing I know is out there that I haven't had a chance to see is the data of, did your kid come home today saying, guess what I learned today? Are they excited to learn? And I know that data is out there. I'd be interested to see it, and how often is it gathered on a weekly basis, and how can we facilitate that eagerness to learn even more? I think that will lead higher test scores, hopefully closing that gap. But boy, I definitely would lean on people that know a lot more than me as far as closing the gap there.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is about policy and governance. Philip, you're first on this one. The school boards work with the superintendent, the community, and the staff to implement the district vision. What are the top 2 policy and/or governance practices that you will introduce in if you are elected, and why? Sorry, that was a little clunky.
I think the two things that come to mind for me is a relook at the K through 12 sex ed curriculum that was adopted. The 3 R's curriculum, I think, shouldn't be what our district adopts. I think that a comprehensive sex ed curriculum is important and is absolutely something that we need to have in place for our teachers for a resource. I don't think that we've selected the right one. So I would want as a school board to relook at that and find a better option. Should have started with my second one. Sorry, I didn't get to make notes. My second one is, I think one priority that I've found with my kids is it seems like there could be more attention to core curriculum in our school district, at least in my kids' school. I think there's lots of great learning, and I've complimented the teachers there many, many times. I think more of a focus on math, science, history, civics, and just more time spent on that. Whereas a parent, we would expect to hear our kids come home, and that's most of what they want to talk about. I would just want to understand that more. I think as a parent, it seems like there's a lot of other things that I hear about for my kids. I would love for that to turn so that I'm hearing more of those types of stories. So as a board member, hopefully we can set policies that help to support that.
Thank you. Betsy, you're next. I'm going to repeat the question. What are the top 2 policy and or governance practices that you will introduce if you are elected, and why?
Thanks. If I'm going to try to sneak 3 in, if I can talk fast. So I think the first thing is I would like to understand what's happening with the superintendent leadership. And so that would, I think, be the first body of work for me, would be to figure out what's going on with our current superintendent who's on leave, with many thanks to Anna for stepping in at this time. Another thing that would be a top priority of mine would be to level set on where we are in terms of teacher recruitment and efforts to retain the high quality teachers we have. So I read recently that like 50% of teachers leave the district after less than 5 years. I need to verify that statistic. Please don't. I saw you write that down. Don't put me on that, but I want to figure out what's going on with that and see what, if anything, the board can do quickly in terms of like hiring campaign that would be at the governance and policy, appropriate at the governance and policy level. And then one more is to understand what, if anything, what's going on with the lack of a safe haven policy at the district. I understand that there's interest in the community to potentially implement a safe haven policy. I'd like to understand fully like why that hasn't happened yet, and if there's an opportunity to get something like that implemented.
What was the last one? I didn't hear that one.
A safe haven policy.
Safe what?
Haven.
Oh, safe haven. Okay. Thank
To
you.
ensure that schools aren't places of immigration action.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Jasmine, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I echo the safe haven policy and look forward to us working out, or to the opportunity to work on that. I would just reiterate the equity policy. I think it's super important for us to be able to tackle that. I think it's long overdue. I think it's a conversation that has been happening in our district for a long time. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that process. For good governance, I definitely think we need to implement professional development for board members. I think it's important that we know what our role is and that we understand what we can do with our powers as board members. And so I think it's important that we include that not just in our budget, but that we include it as a requirement for us as board members, that we do professional development, that we understand our role, that we are visiting our schools, that we are engaging with the community, and that we are being present, because I think it's super important for us to continue to build that trust that has, we've heard it time and time again, that needs to continue to be built. And I think it's just really important for us to be visible in the community and to be open to the conversations that need to happen. So I would reiterate the equity policy is important. We need to hone in on that. We need to pass it. We need to start doing that work. And then professional development for board members is really important, not just for us or for the board that exists, but for the legacy of the district. We need to have board members who always know what they're doing.
Thank you. Alan, and then Lindsay.
Okay, thanks. like Betsy, I'll just try and squeeze in three
Yeah.
real quick.
Yeah.
So I think it's apparent to everybody in the sitting board that the learning gap between the Latino students and the English speaking students, that's got to be up there as a really top priority. And I know it is already for the board. So I'm not sure what I can offer to that other than getting on board and saying, yes, we need to do what we can here. And secondly, as Betsy mentioned, the superintendent. I mean, I think the community is pretty curious what's going on. We have a superintendent who is hired, who's now living in Denver. Everybody knows he's bought a house. It's public knowledge. So, you know, hey, what's happening here? Again, yeah, thanks to Anna. She's been very gracious with her time, sat down with me. But I think the community kind of, you know, I know there are certain limitations to what the board can discuss, but we're all very curious and would like to know what's going on. And then above all, like I've mentioned before, the sex ed curriculum, I think it's way out of line. It's overboard. It's one group's idea of what gender is, how it should be discussed, how it should be taught, at what age it should be taught. I'm very adamant that we need to really relook at that and replace it with a different curriculum. I know one board member, sitting board member, said, yes, I'll adopt it, but I'm going to opt my child out. Another board member, I said, well, when I first saw it, I was like, no way, I can't stand on board for this. And then was walked through it with experts and sort of, in my eyes, talked into it. Were there people on the other side addressing it, saying, you know, what the negative impacts of this curriculum could be? So, you know, I know Philip's mentioned about it. I know this is not a debate, but I would be curious where Betsy, Lindsay, and Jasmine stand on this. I think we all deserve to know that as well.
Thank you, Alan. Lindsay, over to you. Your two top policy and governance practices.
Thank you, Crystal. It's nice to go last on this question. I think a lot of the ideas that have been raised so far are ones that I really support and make me pretty excited to potentially work with people on the board here. To answer Alan's question, what I see as an issue with the sex ed curriculum is specifically the fact that many of the parents who were able to join the conversation did so at a very late stage in the process. So this curriculum research was done over a long period of time, and it was public, and there were forums held on it. And most of the public did show up in the process, but very, very late, if not the last meeting as it was being voted on. And honestly, I think that there's some culpability in the district's side there. So if we're not engaging our community in an effective way, we're not engaging our community in an effective way. And the sex ed curriculum is a great example of that. I think that it's unfortunately put the classrooms that are teaching it in the crosshairs of a conversation that they don't need to be managing along with everything else they're doing. So one governance policy change that I could look at in that area especially is making sure that teachers are not having to individually manage day to day which students have opted out of which section, which they are teaching when. That is absolutely not where they need to be in the conversation. And if our parents are being left out of any part of that conversation, we have to fix that as well. And that's a huge lift on this part. Two other quick things. I do believe that a policy related, anytime teachers' work and classroom professionalism is being discussed at a policy level, they need to be in the room. And again, I'm going to come back to finding ways to fill support staff positions, whether it's substitute teachers, bus drivers, food services, because that is not only a teacher issue, it is a student achievement issue, and it's an equity issue.
Great. Thank you. All right. We're all ready to concluding statements. That went really fast, at least for me, it did. Maybe not for you. Betsy, you're first. Please, each of you have 2 minutes to give concluding statements. Please tell us how you will help the board become more effective, and add any parting thoughts about why you are the best candidate for the job. Betsy, and then Jasmine.
Great. Thanks again to everyone for coming here tonight. For those who are watching or listening to RFCEA, Rob, your group, for all the teachers here and the district as well, for bringing us all together to discuss the most pressing issues facing the Roaring Fork schools right now. I think it's clear we have a lot of work to do, whether it's dealing with curriculum issues, budget issues, policy, superintendent, executive leadership. And I do think that we need to work on it together if we expect to make progress on any of these issues. That is something I have a tremendous amount of experience in my day job. For the last 15 years, I worked at a major global nonprofit organization that tackles some of the most challenging issues in the energy sector every day. And so as a senior leader on that team, I'm able to bring stakeholders together for the right outcomes for our mission. I think I can do that as a board member as well. I say this sort of in jest, but one of my superpowers is sitting in meetings. It's a lot of work to be on a board, sit in a lot of meetings, a lot of meetings with community members, teachers, and I think I bring a lot of experience in listening to folks and being able to take away a lot out of those sessions with people. This election is very consequential. With this election, the voters have the opportunity to elect board members who will focus on real issues. I think a school board can use their leadership and position to smooth the path for students, for teachers, for staff in school buildings. And they can trust the subject matter experts and the employees who they hire and are in school buildings on a daily basis. Or a school board can put up roadblocks to progress and create a bumpier path to success by undermining the expertise of educators or deprioritizing student achievement. And so I hope everyone considers that for the election on November 7th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jasmine and then Alan.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm not the same Jasmine that ran 4 years ago. I've changed quite a bit. I have had the opportunity to learn to survive a pandemic, to help the school district through a hiring process. And we have constantly had to shift gears. I think for me as an advocate for student success, for students in our district, for us making sure that our staff, our teachers, that anybody who walks into our buildings feels welcome, feels like they belong, has been really important. Yesterday, coming back from a work trip, I got to sit next to a family who's going to be joining one of our schools. They have recently arrived from Colombia. They had 3 little kiddos and are going to be enrolling in one of our Glenwood schools. And it just really made me think of some of the tours we've done as board members and really the influx of students we've had that are English learners and that are really coming from dislocated, from places where they have unfortunately had to leave their homes. And, this mom was sharing this journey that they had a week in the making to arrive to Glenwood Springs. And it just really reminded me of how important it is for us to not just have our schools prepared, but to really support our teachers, our staff with the incoming change that we are all seeing across the state, but especially here in our schools in the Roaring Fork School District. So I really look forward to the opportunity to continue to work for the best of our students, for our staff, for our teachers, to continue to advocate at the state level and to continue to advocate that we create the best citizens that we can for the future of our cities and our local economies.
Thank you, Jasmine. Alan and then Lindsay.
Great. So I do have some closing remarks that I've prepared, but I just wanted to say how blessed I feel. I look out and I see my mom and my dad, my wife, my daughter, and we're in this community, we're together. And so no matter who's elected, whether it be Betsy, myself, Lindsay, Philip, I just hope that we can kind of all tone it down a little bit and remember that really in the end, it's like we want the same things. We want what's best for our kids. So I'll try and move through my remarks a little quickly. So as Betsy has stated, she was inspired to run because nonpartisan school boards are increasingly targeted for political influence. So I completely agree here. Just as she would not like to see the horrors of slavery diminished within our educational system, likewise, I do not want to see the school burdening our 5- and 6-year-olds with gender identity issues. People like to say sitting on the school board is not a political position. I think this is kind of disingenuous. We're here tonight talking about government subsidized housing, racial inequities, the role of government within our educational system. Excuse me. Betsy has immense experience. She's a trained librarian. She served on the school board at Ross Montessori, worked for the Rocky Mountain Institute, a liberal think tank. She's more of an insider and has a lot more experience at this stuff than I do. I think if she's elected, she'll largely echo the voices of the school board that's currently sitting. I'm more of an outsider, an everyday Joe, just a concerned dad, far less trained than she at running big systems. If you want to elect someone who will keep your schools running smoothly and in the same direction, you'll probably do well to vote for Betsy. I think she'll do a fine job. If you want more of a, if you're more interested in a naive point of view, if you're more interested in someone to represent our entire community, not just traditional liberals, if you're more interested in bringing diverse people and values together rather than pushing a predetermined agenda, if you want a representative more educable than educated, then I think I might be a good choice for you.
Thank you, Alan. Lindsay, and then Philip.
Thanks, Crystal. And thank you all again for being here, and those of you joining us online or catching up on the recording later. Your engagement in this process is the only way that we can move our community forward. And it is the only way that we can do the best for our students, is to be a part of what's happening in the next year here. I'm going to jump back a little bit. I grew up in Virginia, in the suburbs, and I grew up right at the time when the suburbs were encroaching on all of the beautiful rolling farmlands around us. And the whole county was changing, everything about it, and it was changing fast. And really, there was nothing we could do to change that. My grandmother served on the planning and zoning committee for that county for well over 30 years. And I remember being dragged to so many of the most boring meetings of my life, where she was being celebrated for her great work that I, as a 10-year-old, had absolutely no time for. But what I recognize now, and a woman that I never really saw much in common with when I was a teenager and she passed away, I recognize that we're walking the same path. There's changes coming at our community in the Roaring Fork Valley quickly. And the only way to bring it around to be a community that we want to keep living in is to be involved in those. So my grandmother, she couldn't stop the new developments taking over the farmland, but she insisted there was green space, or that there was a bench, or she insisted that the local families who had owned that land got a fair price instead of being forced out by a corporation. And she sat on this board for so many hours to do that work without a lot of praise, without enough support from her family. And I feel that there's a role I can play that's similar to that in this position, that I'm willing to recognize that we can guide change by showing up, and we can make sure that we are a part of the conversation and that everyone is. There are a lot of voices in this room who feel like they haven't been invited to the table for a while. And there are a lot more voices outside of this room that have never been invited to the table. And I think that there's a lot of work we can do there to move our community forward.
Thank you, Philip.
Thanks. I would echo the thank you. It's nice to look out of a room that is fairly full, which is really, really great. It shows that our community's invested and engaged in this conversation. I've made a career out of leading people. As you can tell, I am not a public speaker by trade, but I connect people and I bring people together. My job for the last 18 years has been taking people with opposing points of view sometimes and bringing them together and helping to find common goals and common things that we can land on. I'm effective at communicating, not necessarily in this platform, but I'm effective at communicating with teams and making sure that people are informed and know exactly what they should be doing. So I can bring those things to the table if I'm elected. I would go back to my heart is seeing quality education for our kids. Regardless of it's setting policy, working on the budget, whatever our job may be, whatever task we're up against as a board, our priority has to be our kids and our community. That's what I started with. I would just like to end with that and say, if you would trust me to do that, I would promise to be faithful to it and put in the time needed and learn what I need to make sure that we do an effective job. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. Thanks to you all for joining us this evening here in the room and on the live stream. And thanks to the candidates. Thanks to our hosts. Thanks to our community for being here. Remember to vote. Make sure your ballots are received by November 7th. Thank you.
Good to see you.